And I want to welcome everyone who is joining us virtually for the Bloomberg Green Festival. And I also do want to welcome our Bloomberg Business Week listeners on Bloomberg Radio joining us at this time. We're going to talk about the business for climate action, and we're going to make the case for that. We've got a company and a leader who has done just that. And I'm delighted to introduce Jesper Brodin. He's the president and CEO of Ingka Group. They are home to three businesses, of course, all of those Ikea stores that are around the world. We're also talking about their shopping centers and then their investments arm. So a lot to talk about. And as I said, they are operating globally. Jesper, so nice to have you here with us. I got to
Thank
ask you,
you.
first of
Pleasure.
all, you said as we were getting ready to set up that before we get into what you guys have done in terms of sustainability at the store and the DNA that is the sustainability really within your company culture, you said to us this is the first time you've traveled in 6 months, that you've left Sweden and you're in the Netherlands. Just talk to us about how that feels. Talk to us about the last 6 months. You guys operate globally. The virus has just impacted us also. So just tell us kind of how things are going.
Well, this year for us, like for everybody on this planet, we have been through a very special journey this year. And I must admit, as I shared with you, to be traveling about again, I felt a bit like the old movie Castaway when coming back to the office, seeing people and enjoying that also, I must say. At the same time, obviously, um, we, just like everybody else, have figured out new ways of leading. We have figured out that we didn't have a map for this situation, but we had a very strong compass, I think, with the way we like to lead and our values that helped us actually, I think, take many good decisions. But it's been a ride.
It's been a ride, no doubt about it. It's interesting that you say that, and we're going to get into kind of your sustainability strategy. That is so much the IKEA and corporate culture here. But I do wonder, having so many of those measures in place, are there any specific anecdotes that you can tell us that helped you guys get through this crisis because of those green initiatives, those sustainable initiatives?
Well, you can say, I think it's all intertangled, right? People, planet, and business, and you can't take out any of these from the equation. So what happened, obviously, to us was that we had periods of dramatic closures in our stores, and we had to find ways to both protect ourselves, our people, our customers, and then on the other hand, we had to make sure that we could save the jobs for the future. And what actually happened in the end of the day was that we were speeding up everything around multi-channel and online. And we went from a good year to a record loss forecast to actually coming back on half of our estimated profit in the end of the day. And that was thanks to, I think, the entrepreneurship of getting things right quickly.
Do you think we're through it? Are you guys getting ready for another wave?
Well, I think at a certain moment we were quite early on forecasting different scenarios, and the period that we have just entered we called the new normal, and I think it's a bit of a deceptive term in a way because the way we see it is that for at least a year to come we need to be very agile, very prepared for outbreaks. I think the term second wave could be misunderstood, so we like to plan more for outbreaks and how to deal with that in the best possible way, both for jobs, for business, and for everything we do in society and contribute to. And obviously, it's clear for all of us that, one year later again, it's still going to be learnings. There will be things that we will be, doing differently, and there will be a lot of, I think, amazing things that we carry with us from this period as well. Hopefully, including the way we realize the importance of investment in sustainability and the opportunity of doing that right.
Well, let's get to that because despite this being a crazy year, a tumultuous year, you guys are on track. And forgive me, I'm going to read from my notes because I want to get it right. You're on track to achieve and exceed a goal to produce as much energy from renewable sources as you consume by 2020. You have made massive investments, about 2.5 billion euro in wind and solar power. You've set a 2030 goal to be climate positive, meaning you're going to reduce more gas emissions than you emit. You are when it comes to electric, 100% electric, 100% of the time, ahead of targets when it comes to deliveries in Shanghai by EVs. You're doing that in Amsterdam, LA, New York, Paris. And here's something, a goal for everyone who's listening. By 2030, you guys have set your ambition is to inspire and enable 1 billion people to live a better everyday life within the limits of the planet. It's really heady stuff and it's impactful stuff.
Mm.
How tough has this been to do? And what has been the business case for climate change for
Mm.
you all?
Well, I think if you look at IKEA's history, you can say we started out with a founder that was a very thrifty person, very smart
Right.
around resources, and I think that's part of our story. So part of this, that sustainability and being smart about people and planet is part of our legacy. My own story started back in '95 with the company when I joined in Asia Pacific at a time when we invested in, I think, what is still today an amazing code of conduct when it comes to production. Those days we had some discussions about can we afford it? Will it drive costs to do the right thing with working hours, salaries, etc. And in the end of the day, it turned out to be brilliant for business. We have the most efficient partners, happy co-workers along, etc. So I think we already then we saw some myths that we needed to bust, and the same goes for the climate goals that we have committed to, where we do not have all the answers yet, so we still have some gaps to be filled the coming years, but we are convinced that this is good business for three reasons, or you can say for two reasons. One is that our co-workers and our customers expect us to take the lead, so it would be, I would say, dangerous to not take that lead
Mm-hmm.
from your revenue side. But secondly, the business model we are building is the new low cost. So sustainability shows in case by case to be the way we will provide low price furniture in the future.
You say, you know what, a couple things. You said it was brilliant for the company. So I'm wondering if you can put some numbers on that in terms of the business case for doing all of this. But I also wonder, you said myths to bust, because I can only imagine some of the
Mm.
internal, discussions, Jesper, that you folks had that said, no, we can't do that. I know it's good for the environment, but it's going to cost too much, or we can't recreate our supply
Mm.
chain. So give me a little bit of that feel.
No, but absolutely. I think the best number I can give you is that last year we're very happy and proud that we were able to grow with some 6% plus, which is a
Hmm.
good, a decent IKEA year. And at the same time, we reduced our absolute carbon footprint across the whole scope 1, 2, and 3 with more than 4%. So it was possible to show healthy growth and at the same time decarbonize, if you like. Obviously, we are very humble and respectful to the future to continue that journey, which is the plan. But that was I think, the first year of proof for us. But then you can say to the myths, I think there are three myths that I see over and over again. One is that purpose and profit don't go hand in hand, which I think and we think is the opposite. There is a very strong myth that sustainability should come at a premium, which I think is very dangerous because then this is a mass movement that needs to involve everybody on this planet. So therefore, it should be rather seen as the new low cost. And finally, there are a lot of myths around that consumption is all bad. And there is bad consumption, but there is also sustainable consumption. So these are the type of topics that sometimes lie in the way for taking the right type of action.
Well, and I do wonder too if things like supply chains, maybe when you guys set out, in the beginning days of the company, or even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe there weren't as many suppliers or many folks that you could reach out to. But what I'm hearing today is a lot of them are out there already. So that if you want to have a greener business, a more sustainable business, you can find that in your supply chain. You just have to make those choices. Is that true? Is that fair?
I would say so. That it comes down to, I think, from if you look at any type of industry, I think the entry ticket to anybody, and especially I would say companies of size that holds a responsibility. So I think you need to start by committing, and there is a bit of a leap of faith in that commitment to Paris. You need to commit to ESG reporting and transparency as well. So I think these are the entry tickets for anyone. But then it all comes down to what is your category plan that you need to put in place. I saw, as an introduction here, I saw Ben at Shell in one of the most important industries, I think, to be part of the transformation, the fossil fuel industry, which we are all
Hmm.
part of and have been. We belong to the consumption industry, home furnishing. So we have some different criteria maybe of things that we need to address. But the important thing is, as much as it can be inspiring to do the symbolic changes, we need to address where it really impacts. And thereby, we need to be able to also measure our activities against CO2 footprint and see that it really makes sense in the totality. And there are a lot of people, I think, who are still looking for the way how to do that. But there are many plans around. And I think Ikea's plan, which we are happy to share with the world, is just one of many good examples on how to do it.
Government has to have a bigger role in this. I mean, what's so interesting is that in order to get all this done, right, at a time when we're pushing back against globalization, when we're pushing back against cooperation, we've never needed it, more than ever before, whether it's on the health pandemic or whether it's on, the climate impact.
Mm.
And yet, what's holding that up? Or where have you seen progress? What's holding it up in your view?
Mm. Yeah, I think now I must admit also I belong to the optimists of the world, so maybe I'm wrong, but I believe we are at a tipping point right now, and you can sense it. There is, of course, people who struggle with admitting the issues, and I do believe that we and most of us should spend less time on that. We need to look into the people who are ready to take a leap here and contribute to the movement because it's also, the clock is ticking, and we probably have entered what is the most important decade in the history of humankind. So we need to get moving with actions. And thereby, it's not so much about discussing the problem that is needed. It's about discussing the actions that needs to be taken to mitigate the situation.
You know what's interesting? And if people are, I feel like if you're not necessarily someone who, buys into or believes that we're having climate change, you guys get into the science and what the impact will be in your sustainability report. You talk about, if we see, 4-degree Celsius increase in terms of the heating of Earth, you write in this report, our ability to mitigate the risk is very limited and the costs for the business are far higher and more damaging. I mean, we're talking about the bigger impact we have on our environment, your access to resources, the cost of resources, the impact of flooding or fires, like all of this starts
Right.
to add up, right, on the cost of doing business. And also,
Yes.
it's not as healthy an environment for people to live in, to work within.
Well, you can say that to your point. We have since many years passed the point where a climate threat is a theory. It's in our P&Ls already, and thereby I think it gives us more motivation. You can say on the challenging side of this, from a human perspective, is of course if we do everything right from now on, we still will have to pay for the debt that we have the last say 100 years or so. So we are in a hurry to turn the trend, obviously, and we will need to brace ourselves a little bit for the issues that we have ahead of us in spite of that. But I think it's a time for the world to come together, and it's time for leadership. And I actually do see that. If I compare 6 months, 12 months, 24 months back, there is a different story right now, industry after industry. And I think in particular in the corporate circles, there is industry leaders in every category stepping forward. I have the pleasure to be part of the World Economic Forum's Climate Alliance. And that's a group of very important companies in different categories that have moved from agreeing on the issue to actually committing and taking actions. So we see this in area after area. And I think to your point also, of course, this is a collaboration where we need to be very close to the political leaders of the world, because it's an important collaboration where I think politicians can help to incentivize and actually catalyze change much faster if we work together. So it is an opportunity, in particular now after COVID, as a lot of wise people have mentioned, to build back better. So that's what we need to do.
Well, talk to me about geography. I'm sure that there are parts of the world where it's tougher for you guys where you operate to kind of make the business case for climate action. There's also parts of the world that maybe don't embrace, some of what's in your DNA, your corporate DNA, whether it's China on one hand or Russia, So what do you do? What's your thoughts about operating there, even if you don't agree with all of their initiatives? Maybe they're not as sustainable as a company or a country, excuse me.
Yeah. No, I think to start with, I think the business idea and the vision of Ikea is to be where the many people are, to serve people within wallets with great home furnishing. and thereby you can say we are slow and long term in a way. So we don't enter a market and step out overnight, but we progress with investments, with our physical investments, with our digital investments, and our long-term goal is obviously to try to be where there are people. So therefore, we happen to be in Russia, in China, in US, in India. We have just recently started as well.
Right.
Then, obviously, political change tends to come with a shorter cycle sometimes. And there, we have little opportunity to do others than to adapt to realities. We have had decades of open trade, and now we have had recently a period where this has been more difficult. And with all the respect for the situation in the world, I think so far in our way of viewing it, collaboration over borders tend to both be good long term for both jobs and for consumers. So sometimes this can be a struggle. But at the same time, I think we are at a place where we try to reach out and try to see how we can influence in a positive way in the society where we act.
I do wonder too if you think it's easier for you guys to be sustainable because it's a foundation that owns the company, right? And it's a different it's not a corporate structure, a
Yeah.
publicly held company where every quarterly or every half year you guys are reporting your financials. Does that give you a leg up in doing all of this?
I think so, to be honest. I think some of my fellow colleague CEOs who are on the stock market, for example, working with quarterly targets, have a different situation that maybe that we have, and I have, being long-term foundational based and also a foundation that works with, in the end of the day, charity for people and planet. So I think definitely so. And at the same time, we can still serve as an example because the investments we make are not about charity. They are fundamental transformations into a better business. So in a way, I think it's okay that we can serve as an example for that. And then I think it takes a lot of courage today to be a leader, because at the end of the day, you have stakeholder capitalism to care for. But at the end of the day, I think you need to also face your own family, your friends, yourself. And at this time, there is an opportunity for each one of us to do what we believe is right. And in some cases, that can be easier said than done. But if we are a critical mass of companies that move in this direction, we will basically reshift the competitive landscape. And that's what actually is happening as we speak, including
What get
how consumers
Yeah.
respond to brands.
Well, that's, I think, a really significant part of it. I think about my co-host on our radio show, Bloomberg Business Week. We both have kids, and kids who are turning around looking about, what are the ingredients in something, or looking at where a company
Mm.
manufactures, what's the climate, how much water is wasted in manufacturing. How significant is that in terms of, again, supporting the business case for being sustainable, for being green in what you do? I mean, we talk about it so much, Jesper, and I know it's important to me, but I do wonder, is that becoming much more significant? Do you guys talk about it in like a boardroom? Are boards having these discussions because they understand it's important?
I think so. To be honest, a few years ago, I think it was more difficult to bring in those personal views, but also the many parts of the equation here. So again, back to the myth that profit and purpose were two different worlds, and I think we belong to the lucky ones in that case. We have very good discussions, and we are challenged by our board to do a better job when it comes to sustainability, including communicating it. But again, I think we are at the tipping point where this is becoming the new reality. And you know how it works when you create the momentum, suddenly it becomes very lonely on the other side. And from a customer perspective, what we see is dramatic. And there is no difference in the world if we go from market to market. If you go from China to US to Sweden, the concerns are up in the 80s, 90s of all the people we interview. And we interview a lot of people on this topic. They are concerned, typically, and they also typically struggle with understanding how they can impact. And of course, consumers can impact to start with by choosing what brands to buy from. And this is getting more and more clear. And in particular, I think when you go down to the younger generations of consumers, they are more picky. they are better in researching, and they are very demanding. So I think in a way the consumer trends are helping us to take some decisions.
Hey, one thing I want to ask you, because we just got about 5 minutes left. In addition to being climate positive by 2030, you are committed to being circular by then as well, which is fascinating to me. It's changing waste into resources across your operations, enable people at home to do so as well. This is basically how you get rid of waste. It's massive.
Mm.
How do you do that?
Well, it's many things in sustainability. There is not like one silver bullet, so to say. So I think every
Right.
company needs to look at their footprint, also in materials, so to say. But then again, when you start to pick them in the right order, you find a lot of opportunities. So in our case, to recycle paper and recycle plastic, for example, is a business benefit. It's not a problem. And then you can go all the way to some of the material equations that we have not yet found a good solution for. So it's like case by case, you work away. But if you look at it, latest investments we did in Netherlands for a model that is being scaled out to more markets is how do you bring back mattresses, and how do you
Right.
actually make new mattresses of the same. It's not only a good business case, it's a good investment. And down the line, there will be taxes and malus systems put on the wrong way of doing this. So in a way here, I think, again, governments and companies are and should more go hand in hand in how to stimulate it. Circularity is not the end goal. It's one way to achieve sustainability, and it's a very attractive one most often.
Kind of in line with this, we have an audience member asking about product durability and life cycle, the trade-off between affordability and durability. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, because also I would say it's a bit in the landscape of myths, but a few years ago we took a big address within the company to actually review everything in quality, and everything that wasn't durable we challenged and moved our targets on. So I think it's one of the steps to achieve sustainability is obviously to make sure that you have longevity on everything you do. Um, and and then you can say one of the dangerous myths there is also that you have to pay for quality, or that you have to pay for sustainability. That's not the way we see it. We think by scaling things, we can build in quality and sustainability into our industries. And there's an abundance of amazing examples on how that works. So I think also there you can say mass production is actually a friend of sustainability, because that's how you
Huh.
scale change.
If you had one piece of advice to, I think, our audience here and for leaders that they could take that would significantly impact their company and make them more sustainable, what would it be?
I think what has helped us was to fundamentally agree on what the reason to why this is important. Secondly, I think there needs to be some sort of leap of faith and commitment, meaning that giving yourself maybe, hopefully not to 2040 and 50, but to 2030, you should also, I think, have some confidence that some of the answers lie by exploring the journey ahead of us. And then I think the third would be to study some of the leaders, study some of the plans that exist, because I think there's a lot of things that we can replicate in different industries. And by working together, I think we can move this agenda faster. And we will.
If we don't,
We will make it happen. We have to make it happen, and we will, I'm sure.
well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, if we don't get this right, what's your fear?
Now, if we don't get this right, we will get it right because the consequences will be tremendous for
We don't
us.
have a
So
choice.
I think we tend to spend less time again on doubting the change, and less about the fear. We had much more of that a few years ago. But right now we're busy in the actions. We're working in scope 1, 2, 3. We're addressing some low-hanging fruits and some very difficult challenges. So I think it's
Right.
just to get busy. That is how to do it.
Well, Jesper Brodin, as I read through all that you guys are doing, you really are the poster child and really have the playbook in terms of how to be a sustainable company in so many different methods. So I suggest everybody really check out your website because you really are doing it in so many different areas. Jesper, thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Really
Karen. Thanks for the
appreciate it.
opportunity.
I think next time we do that, we do this on a sailboat. You're a sailor, I'm a sailor, so I think we should be doing it this way.
That sounds like a deal. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
I wish you
Take,
well. Thank you so much. Of course, that's
yeah,
Jesper
you
Brodin,
too.
President and CEO of Ingka Group, joining us here for the Bloomberg Live Bloomberg Green Festival.